Hey everybody, before I head out this morning I just thought I'd do another story time. Now one of the viewers had asked me about canoeing and if I'd ever fallen out of a canoe and whatnot, and of course pretty much anybody who's done a lot of canoeing has fallen out of a canoe, and I've done an awful lot of canoeing. Not so much over the past 10-15 years since I've been out in Manitoba, but on my trap lines in Ontario I pretty much lived in canoes in the fall. My last trap line I had, I don't know, 7 or 8 canoes scattered about my trap line that I used mainly because I don't care for carrying them too much, so I'd have, if there was a really long portage, I would have a canoe on each side of it just so to save time and whatnot. But back, I think my first canoeing experience started when I was 15, and I'd worked up north at a lodge for the summer, and as a bonus at the end of the year they gave me a brand new Scott 14-foot paddler, which was a beautiful little canoe, and ended up I would leave it out in my duck hunting spot in the fall, and I would go to school. And back then, that was back in the days when you could get away with a few things, because I used to bring my shotgun to school with me. I'd have it broken down in my pack sack with the barrel sticking out, and my homeroom teacher used to question me once in a while, but I just after school I'd bike over to my duck hunting spot and canoe out to my blind and go from there. But that canoe ended up getting stolen that first year by some very nice people who just thought I didn't need a canoe. They didn't, I guess they were just didn't want me to drown. So but anyways, from that point on, after that I pretty much had a canoe all the time, and like I said, numerous canoes. But one thing that I've been thinking back on this, and I don't think I have ever fallen out of a canoe when I was by myself in the canoe. Now it's my first flip over when I was 16. I had bought another canoe already, and I was out duck hunting with a guy who wanted to come out with me, and this is not his fault, but it's both of ours. We were paddling out to the blind, and a wood duck flew by, and it was just like just like a photograph of each other. We both put the paddle down, picked up the guns, and went like this, and as soon as that duck got broadside, we both blasted at the exact same time. Now I'd shot hundreds of times out of the canoe and never had a problem, but I was by myself. I knew what to do, and now I had somebody in the canoe who was inexperienced, so he didn't know how to shift his weight. But anyways, we went like that. I guess we both leaned over at the exact same time, and that canoe was upside down in a matter of, faster than you can blink your eye. And this scary, it wasn't very deep. It was up to our chest, that's all. But the scary thing is when he had a pump action shotgun, and everybody with a pump knows, you shoot and that next shell is in the chamber automatically. So he had already put another shell in, and the cold water shocked him so bad he pulled the trigger while he was underwater, and the gun went off. And that could have been a disaster, but nothing ever happened about it. Now that is the only time I've ever flipped a canoe when I was with another person. But good old Lobo, my dog from when I was younger, and if you guys have read the book, all about this. Lobo had a really good habit of, you know, when I was stopping to check a trap somewhere, he would, you know, not want to get out of the canoe. So I'd be, are you sure? And, oh yeah, no, he stayed there. So I'd get 3/4 of the way out of the canoe, and all of a sudden he'd decide that he was coming out too, and he'd come between my legs around the side of me, and then probably half a dozen times in my life while he was still alive, he knocked me out of a canoe. But then the scariest time was not even a canoe, it was a boat. My brother-in-law Mike and I were it was a late spring, pickerel season had opened up, and we went into Pokey Lake on my trap line by White River to go pickerel fishing with his brother and a friend from Michigan. And we got to the lake, and the lake was still frozen. So we were like, oh man. And then I had the brilliant idea that we would go to the far end of the lake around my trapping trails. It's, you know, maybe 9 miles around. And then carry the boat over the portage down the rapids, which is about 3/4 mile rapid. And we could put in right in the river, and that's where the fish would be spawning, and we should do really good right there. They're just coming off their spawn. So we decided to do that, but his boat was too wide to get through my trapping trail. So then my next brilliant idea was to float the boat down the rapids. You know, I'd gone down these rapids, floated a canoe down several times. It was not an issue. It was not, you know, it was not like a waterfall. It was just a long, steady rapids. So, like a couple of newbies, we jumped in the boat and I never scouted the rapids first. Like I said, I'd been down there, you know, dozens of times. But we floated, and we went around a corner, and there across the river was a brand new log jam. And I was like, you know, we're talking right in the middle of spring flood. And I was like, oh man, this is not going to be pretty. And I told my brother-in-law to hang on. So when we hit that log jam, you know, I said, keep your weight all at the back of this boat. And sure enough, we hit this thing, and this log jam, we hit it sideways. My brother-in-law fell backwards when we hit, and then that water grabbed those keels and just tilted like this, and then he fell forward, and that boat went straight down underwater. And like I said, it wasn't it was probably only 5 or 6 feet deep right there under the log jam. But when that boat went straight down sideways, it built a kind of a little dam. You know, there was no real water flowing. It was just all of a sudden everything backing up. And the tree that had caused the log jam was a big poplar, and there was one big branch hanging about 3 feet over top of the water. And I told Mike, because Mike looked at me like, pretty stupid, eh? And I told him, I said, get a hold of this branch and don't let go of it, because I knew as soon as that water stopped backing up in it, and it released it was going to be awful. So it only took a matter of 5 seconds before that water backed up. We're standing up to here in the water, and it's getting higher and higher, and then all of a sudden it released, and we're holding onto that branch, and that the current was pulling us under the water, and the spring of it would pull us back up, and it would like this, back and forth. And all I can remember, is the look of my brother-in-law's face, because it was like kind of like we messed up here, didn't we? And when he came out of that water the first time, it was just utter shock and disbelief on his face. It was, it's hard to find something funny in a situation like that, but the look at his face was pretty comical. But anyways, we bobbed up and down like that for a while, and he was able to hand over hand his way back to the shoreline to get out of danger, and I was right on the end of the branch, so I was able to just reach over and grab a hold of a floating log. Well, not floating, it was stuck on shore, but it was kind of parallel to the river, and get myself out on the other side of the river. And you know, that was the closest I've ever come to, you know, to biting it in a watercraft. But you know, on another rapids, you know, I had the bright idea to take my square stern down this rapids in low water. You know, it was fall, but it was a fairly dry fall. Low water. I thought I'll just, you know, float it down instead of dragging it over the, you know, 100-yard portage. I had a bunch of beavers in the canoe, and see, there was a little rapids, then a pool about 200 yards long, and then the big rapids. And I mean, the big rapid was Honeymoon Chutes. It was a drop of 100 feet in a matter of a quarter mile. And so I knew I wasn't going over that one, but I thought, well, I'll say I've got probably 3 trips I had to make with all them beavers, so if I just float through the first one. And it was the same thing, more weight in the canoe than I realized. The keels on those square stern canoes sink down quite a bit, and I rubbed a rock, and it just caught me right midway where all the weight was, and just stopped me dead and just spun that canoe like this, and just, it was amazingly fast. I mean, just how fast it just went like this. The dog scrambled. I lost my balance, went out the back side of the canoe, and was able to just grab the gunnel as I went out. And you know, like I said, it wasn't deep water, but you know, once I grabbed a hold of the gunnel and got myself, you know, situated, I was able to stand up because it was only, you know, a few feet deep. But it's just, that's how fast you can do something. You know, but I just want to mention a fella, well, a couple of fellas that I used to know that did a lot of canoeing. Now, Paul Hack from Mount Pleasant, Michigan, used to come up to my trap line all the time, and just, you know, we're talking, got 80 years old, and he'd come up all by himself, paddle around my trap line for a week, and just have a real good time. And you know, great guy, super nice guy. And then he introduced me to a fellow named John Buckley, who owned a canoe rental place over on the, I think it was the Chippewa River, just outside of Mount Pleasant, just west of Mount Pleasant. But he was a canoeing, you know, phenom. I mean, some of the trips he told me about he took, and I went on several trips with him. Boy, and this guy, like I said, I paddled an awful lot of canoes in my life, and when we get on an open stretch of river, this guy would leave me sitting still. But I mean, the canoes he had too, he had a, you know, canoe with foot rudders, or foot pedals for a rudder, so he wouldn't have to steer with his paddling. But my goodness, you know, but I have to say, once we got, like, we used to do a canoe tripping through areas that was not tripped at all, and there was no portages cut out. We basically, you know, went until we hit a place we couldn't paddle, and then just pulled through the bush until we could paddle again, just exploring. But you know, as far as he would leave me behind on the open water, by the time we got to a spot where we had to pull through the bush, you know, I mean, he was quite a bit older than me, but I would always, by the time he got his canoe and packs and everything, I was always in the water going. By the time he did that, I would catch up and pass him. But he didn't do a lot of the stuff that I did, and he did way more paddling. Like, I mean, he's told me stories about, you know, paddling like from Lake Michigan all the way through the Great Lakes up to St. Lawrence, and then down the east coast to Florida, and stuff like this. And him and his wife Donna were they were wardens in the Everglades Park in the winter time. They lived the whole winter on a houseboat patrolling the Everglades, and you know, their station was out of a houseboat, and then they would patrol in canoes all around the park and stuff. But it was, you know, canoes can be dangerous, but man, there's just nothing like paddling a canoe on a quiet morning or quiet evening, paddling around. It's just as silent, you know, quieter than any animal walking through the bush or swimming. You know, it's just an amazing feeling. And that's one thing I miss about this cabin. Was on my old trap lines, I would be like on an evening like last night, you know, when I'd had supper and I had maybe half an hour before dark, I would be in my canoe and I'd just be paddling along the lake shore, you know, shooting rats, shooting the odd beaver, whatnot, you know, and come around a corner and there's a moose, you know, standing there, and you paddle right up, you know, close to them. You know, I guess I could throw a canoe in this river and just paddle back and forth from right there to right there, right there to right there, but that wouldn't be nearly as much fun. But anyways, that's my story time for this morning. And so, yeah, I've fallen out of canoes. And like I said, anybody who hasn't done a lot of canoeing. So, alrighty, we'll see ya.